This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 261. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where we're talking about painting, modeling, and wargaming experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 videos a week. How? Could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, we got hit with an absolute legend, a classic Imperial Guard character returning potentially from the grave. But first, did you know that most websites are made up of squares? And today's sponsor, Squarespace, is here to help with that. Squarespace allows anyone to design the website of their dreams with the most powerful and easiest design tools in the industry, like Design Blueprint. Using AI technology empowers anyone to build a more personalized website tailored to their needs, crafting a bespoke digital identity. Choose from a professionally curated selection of styling options to build a unique online presence from the ground up. Squarespace makes sure it's easy to launch your website and get discovered fast with integrated optimized SEO tools, so you show up more often to more people and grow the way you want. With Squarespace, it's never been easier to set up a unique online storefront. Whether your services are physical, digital, or service-based, selling your wares has never been easier. Squarespace offers an unmatched ability to showcase your unique wares with images, videos, reviews, and add-ons, all capped off with their seamless checkout tools, letting your customers use whatever system they prefer, whether Klarna, ACH Direct Deposit, Apple Pay, Afterpay, or ClearPay. Squarespace offers a free trial for you to dip your feet into and test the waters. And ready to dive in headfirst, you can go to squarespace.com/EonsOfBattle or follow the link in the description to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The savior of Armageddon returns. Commissar Sebastian Yarrick. I remember when he was sort of killed off, I went looking for his rules when I saw the new model, and he actually doesn't have rules in 10th edition, which seems absurd because there's 10th edition rules for almost everything in the entire game. Like there's rules for the old Tallarn Mukali Rough Riders, which is a really old Forge World kit that was only sold for a very short amount of time, and they're awesome. But like those guys have 10th edition rules, but Yarrick does not. I don't know what his rules will look like. He is a really, really big deal. And I think Games Workshop is a little bit bad at making rules for the big deals. And I think part of the problem is that they have models who are literal gods. And so they have to be incredibly powerful. Like Primarch's Angron, Angry Ron himself needs rules that like feel fun and fluffy and flavorful in the world of 40k and in the game. And so lesser characters can't have utterly absurd rules. But then you end up stuff like the Tau Commander Farsight is 100 points. She's really cheap, and she's the commander of all forces of the Tau army. Or Imhotep the Stormlord, like the new big bad of the Necrons. He's slowly regaining the power of like the old days of the War in Heaven. And he's just like a regular guy. I think he's 120 points, and he lets you like, I think put a couple of units back into strategic reserve or something. It's just not that exciting. And I feel like he's gonna end up in the less exciting category of rules where he'll be a decent character with like 2 abilities on his data sheet. And he'll be fine. You'll take him if like you can kind of write him into your list and you want something a little fluffy and a little bit Armageddon-y. But I do wish that Games Workshop, I almost wish they went down the route of the gods are not in the game, but the named characters in 40k have rules reminiscent of those godly profiles. Because the Silent King exists, and the Silent King is a literal god. He won a galactic war. He's immortal. He's all powerful. And he exists on the tabletop as like a pretty good unit. He's powerful, but like Imhotep the Stormlord should be at the same power level as the Silent King is on the tabletop. And I feel like Yarrick should be at a similar power level to the Silent King. He is truly unstoppable and unkillable because he's now back in the game. But like a Stormbolter and a Power Fist and a regular old human body, I can't imagine he's gonna set the whole world on fire like he probably should. I mean, he is Gazgul's favorite opponent. He is the unkillable, like undying Commissar. He has an Orc Power Claw, which technically should not work, but probably does work because all of the orcs believe that he's cool and awesome enough that the Power Claw does work attached to his arm. He's called Baelai because one of his eyes is missing and he replaced it with a digital weapon so he can shoot lasers out of his robot eye. The shooting profile of his Baelai should be incredible. It should be like, should it be torrent so that it can kill like 4 orc boys in a single shooting phase? That would be really fun. He carries a Stormbolter, which it is a human level Stormbolter. There's different levels of Stormbolters, like the Adeptus Astartes have Rhino mounted Stormbolters and one's carried by Terminators. But then there's also the Sororitas Stormbolter, which can be wielded by a somewhat augmented human. And then there's Imperial Guard Stormbolters, which in theory could be one-handed by a regular old human being. Although I'm sure that he has some cybernetic enhancements that allow him to wield it with a little bit more finesse than your average like Imperial Guard Sergeant. The model looks really, really good. In the Warhammer article revealing his return, they show off the previous Yarrick models. I've actually painted, I don't think I have them, or Sean, I painted it for Sean because it's Sean's model back in the Dizzy. And so I've actually painted the old metal one with his claw just pointed straight up at the sky, or like kind of pointed off like chanting. And then there's the old model with the power fist that's kind of got the crabby claw pinchers, which I do really like. It's a funny look. It's a really, really interesting power claw. I like the old silliness of some of the older 40K models where just the sculptor just had an amazing idea in that moment and he created something really unique and weird, where now like a power claw has a distinct look and all power claws look basically the same because that is the power claw, but I think that they can make some weird offshoot different things. And I also really like that his old Stormbolter had like a cat skeleton wrapped around it. It's a really, really weird thing. I guess it has giant tusks. Maybe it's like a Gretchen skeleton that is just wrapped around the Stormbolter. That would have been a really cute touch, but the new model is fantastic. Everything about it is exactly like the old model, but just a little bit cleaner and a little bit crisper. He's got a little wire running from his like back to his eye that is definitely going to be a little bit fragile, but it's attached to his head. So 2 good solid points of contact. I bet it's pretty darn solid. Games Workshop hasn't made a model in a long time that was actually kind of rough in terms of its fragility. The worst model that Games Workshop has ever made has got to be Saint Celestine. I have Saint Celestine and it's impossible. She's on top of 2 tiny little purity seal tassels. The iron halo around on her head is attached with like one little wire. You can't breathe on it too hard or else it's gonna fall off. Her wings, everything about that model looks really, really good. But in practice, it is a bouncy, fragile mess. And I think since then, Games Workshop has done a really, really good job. I think the Age of Sigmar skeletons, the Death Rattle skeletons, are a little on the wimpy side. But other than that, Games Workshop has done a pretty good job of making their models really, really solid and really, really well sculpted. Yarrick came back to 40K with an animation that was really, really good. The interesting thing about it starts off with just a bunch of war scenes of Imperial Guards getting absolutely wrecked by orcs, and some kind of a commander like giving an epic speech, kind of reminiscent of Sanguinius's speech at the Gates of Terra in the Horus Heresy books. It does feel very like powerful and impressive. But then, of course, Yarrick shows up at the end to just fix everything and put everything back the way it should be. In the animation, you only see Cadians and Kriegers, which are the only ones that really exist in miniature form. There is Khazarkin, but I assume Khazarkin are on their way out. Or not Khazarkin, but Catachans. And I assume Catachans are on their way out because they're really, really old, kind of terrible plastic models. Hopefully they'll get a revamp. I think they probably will. For years and years, like the Games Workshop Mini of the Year or the Store Anniversary Birthday model was an actual Catachan character. And so they clearly have the sculpting chops and like the files on their computers to make Catachan, but they haven't done it yet. And I think it's because Games Workshop has kind of shot themselves in the foot when it comes to Imperial Guard. All of the different Imperial Guard regiments are very cool and very beloved by the fans, but also very, very different. Space Marines are kind of perfect. Blade Guard veterans work perfectly, no matter if you're Blood Angels or Black Templars or Space Wolves or Raven Guard or Iron Hands, Imperial Fist, they work flawlessly into all of those chapters. You might glue on like an extra little tassel or purity seal to make it fit a little bit better with the theming of your army, but in general, that one box is perfect for many different armies. With Imperial Guard, a Cadian heavy weapon team is not a Vostroyan heavy weapon team. Like a squad of Vostroyan Firstborn are not Talon Desert Raiders. Is Games Workshop gonna make 10 different boxes of regular troopers and heavy weapon teams and command squads for each of the different flavors of Imperial Guard? They should, but it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for them to do that. It's just kind of a lot. I personally would love Vostroyans. The Vostroyan Firstborns with their red coats and their tall, fluffy hats, I really think that they're cool. And the longer Laslock rifles it's just a really cool looking thing. But you can't do it at Acadians and Kriegers. It's impossible. You would have to, it's not even a matter of kit bashing and converting. The parts just aren't there to represent that faction of Imperial Guard properly. And so they would need to have their own models to properly bring them into 40K. But then is the Imperial Guard Codex going to just be a mile long of different colors of Imperial Guardsmen? And then is half the shelf at Warhammer stores going to be Imperial Guard to represent all of these different sub-factions and themes? Probably not. I feel like Games Workshop should, but I totally see why it doesn't make a lot of sense. With Yarrick coming back, he is Armageddon, and the Armageddon Steel Legion is a very, very beloved a very beloved regiment of Imperial Guard. But they're also Imperial Guardsmen who wear like long or trench coats and gas masks. And Games Workshop just came out with a bunch of Imperial Guard who wear trench coats and gas masks, and that is the Death Corps of Krieg. So is there going to be Death Corps of Krieg and the Steel Legion? They are different, but are they different enough to warrant new minis? I think if you paint the Death Corps of Krieg as Steel Legion, something is still missing. The gas masks do look a little different. Their greatcoats do look a little bit different, but they're so similar, but they're just not similar enough to make it work. I would assume Games Workshop is also coming up with the same issue of it'd be cool to do everything, but does it make any sense to do everything? Probably not. The cool thing about the animation, it does get you pumped for the Imperial Guard. And this probably won't happen, but I do think it would be awesome if the launch box was Imperial Guard versus the Orcs. I think Guard is popular enough that they could pull it off. Space Marines are the classic thing. Everybody loves Space Marines. Almost everybody has an army of Space Marines. They probably should be the thing that has been in the launch box. They've always been one of the factions in the launch box going back to the very earliest days of Warhammer 40,000. So I can't imagine that changing, but I do think Imperial Guard is cool enough to pull it off. I think a lot of people would pick up the box if it was something wild. Like if the box was Steel Legion versus the Orcs, I would buy it for myself. I could maybe start an Imperial Guard army if it was Steel Legion with like that kind of earth brown color of their cloaks and the rusty or like the dirty steel of their helmets. Like that is a really, really cool faction. But I'm 50-50 on if the Catachan are gonna survive getting like refreshed in plastic. The Catachan are also really cool, just an absolute army of Rambos, down to the red bandana. Like they are Rambo, but are they? It's just weird that there's 3 different just regular trooper squads, there's 3 different heavy weapon teams, and then there's 3 different command squads that are the same exact thing. Their rules are swapped around just a little bit in the Imperial Guard Codex. Currently, I think for heavy weapon teams, the Death Corps of Krieg kind of win out because they have the slightly better options and slightly better rules. I think Acadians kind of win out as your baseline infantry because you can just get so many plasma guns in a single squad. Catachan also have a little something where if you max them out, you get more flamethrowers than you'd think. But the differences are so subtle that it does feel a little weird. There's only one like tactical Space Marine. It is the regular Intercessor Space Marine. If you want a Space Marine carrying a bolter, it's going to be that kit. But for Imperial Guardsmen with las guns, there's quite a few different subtle ways you can go with it. It's very fussy. It's very tricky. I would love to be able to see the future and know what Games Workshop is going to do with the Imperial Guard. I think as things are, it's fine, but it could be so much more. I know that there's tons of people out there who do like Imperial Guard, but they're kind of just waiting for the Tallarn or the Vostroyan or any of the Maccabean Janissaries. Like, they're waiting for the very specific flavor of Imperial Guard to be able to exist that currently doesn't really exist in just Cadians, Kriegers, and kind of Catachan. Imperial Guard is really weird, but it is a cool army. But speaking of cool armies, this weekend I played in an Apocalypse game. It was 14 players, 3,000 points aside, so 42,000 points of miniatures on many tables shoved together. And it was one game of 40k that we were all playing together. We were split into two groups. There was the Xeno side, and then there was the Chaos side, which was Chaos/Imperium. And it was epic. The rules were edited to be a little bit more back and forth, alternating activation, because we were all playing the same game of 40k. And so, like, between all of these people, we only played for like 5 hours. It kind of petered out towards the end when things definitely went in the Xenos' favor a little bit. But it was ridiculously fun to push Warhammer 40,000 to the absolute end of like sanity and reasonableness. It was really, really fun. I was playing my Black Templars, 3,000 points. I just built maximum point squads. I had a big brick of 10 Sword Brethren, a big brick of 20 Crusader squads. I brought my Centurion Devastators in a full 6-man brick, and boy did they perform. If you make it so that I can bring 400 points of Centurions, it's gonna be a good time. And then basically I was backed up by a buddy of mine who brought some Chaos Knights, and Chaos Knights, it was really, really important to have those Chaos Knights, because survivability in Apocalypse, where you've got, instead of 2,000 points and 2,000 points on a regular like regulation board, you've got 6,000 points versus 6,000 points on the same size board. Everything is shooting and fighting and dying. And so having some really, really hard hitting stuff was really, really good. Like Imperial Guard plays really, really well into Apocalypse. If you tell an Imperial Guard player all they have to do is sit tight and shoot, that is something that they can really, really perform well at. Where I think a lot of the armies, like the close combat focused Black Templars and a bunch of the Orc players I saw, were really, really struggling to get their models through no man's land to actually get into close combat. It was a lot of things died really, really quickly. In this Apocalypse game, it was mostly just regular infantry, like the normal things that you would take in a regular 40k game. If we ever play again, I'm definitely bringing Stompy, the Titan. Although I don't know if Stompy, even with his 2-up save and 60 wounds, I don't know if he would really survive that long. There's a lot of flat damage 4 and flat damage 6 in the Necrons that could probably kill him fairly quick, especially with Basilisks. Every single Basilisk tank on the board can shoot him because they basically have infinite range. Although it would be indirect fire, so it's only hitting on 4s, so 50-50, but I do want Stompy to actually see some tabletop time and to absolutely do some work. I think Apocalypse is a really, really fun format for 40k, although I think I haven't played the actual Apocalypse that came out in 8th or 9th edition, and I heard good things, but it did totally change 40k. You would bring like big bricks of things, but they would have a different profile and a different save characteristic than they would have in classic 40k to make the game feel like be able to move a little bit quicker. But I think a lot of people didn't, I think those Apocalypse rules actually worked quite well for playing massive games of 40k and being able to actually play them and get them done. But I think a lot of people didn't really gel with it, because when you're playing Apocalypse, you're not looking for the game to work. particularly, you're just looking to put an absurd number of plastic miniatures on the table and just see what happens. Just have an absolute extravaganza of rolling dice and explosion results and just weird stuff happening. Like, you know, a Black Templar and a Chaos Knight basically working together to fight off a bunch of Necrons. Like, when would that ever happen? But it did, and it was glorious. And even though eventually the Necrons did kind of whittle us down to basically nothing, we had defeated 2 C'tans, 3 Doomsday Arcs, and we'd made our way to the Silent King and his entourage before we eventually had to call it a day. But holy cow, I got to face New C'tan for the first time, and they are brutal. Toughness 11, 16 wounds, with a 4-up invulnerable save, -1 to oncoming damage, stealth, so -1 to be hit on the Deceiver. It's just a little bit, and a 5-up feel no pain. It's absolutely absurd. And reanimation protocols on top of all of that, which can be made even better with a reanimator so that you're reanimating 2 D3 wounds in your command phase, or if there's a res orb nearby, then you can resurrect D6 at basically the start of any phase. It's absolutely nutty, and it's just a kind of upsetting to fight against, because with all of those different saves going on, you just can't reliably do any damage to it. I mean, -1 to oncoming damage. When my sword brethren slammed into the Deceiver, they throw, 3 times 10, 30 plus another like 20 almost for the characters. Like 50 attacks gets cut in half, and then it gets cut in half again. And then that goes to the save characteristic, 4-up invulnerable save, so it gets cut in half again. And then it goes to the Feel No Pain, where it's cut by a 5th. And so all of that, like all of them punching the Deceiver did like 8 damage. It's absurd. There's like, that's because the 2 damage gets cut in half again. So there's just, you need to do like you need 40 attacks to go through so that it can get through the 4-up, 5-up. It can be done a little bit more reliably with anti-tank weapons. But then again, it can't, because even if you've got like 4 las cannon shots all going through from a Land Raider, half of them are going to go away to the invulnerable save. All of the remaining ones are going to get -1 damaged, and then they're going to go to the Feel No Pain, where they're going to get saved in a 5 or a 6. We threw so many shots and so many punches into these things, and they did eventually go down. But the Deceiver went down to 10 Sword Brethren and a Chaos Knight, both punching him at the same time for 2 turns. Like, it's a little much. I feel like maybe if they lost access to reanimation protocols, I think that would be fair, especially since reanimation protocols can be edited with stratagems and other Necron units. Like, reanimation protocols is a wonderful, flavorful rule that I think is perfectly fair on Necron warriors and immortals, maybe even Canoptic wraiths. But on like your god machines, it's a little rough. If 11th edition brings anything, I would love for them to figure out a way to have the biggest things in 40K feel fun to play with and fun to play against. Because currently, I don't think they do. I think they just feel like it just feels like, can I do this? Maybe I have a 20% chance of getting lucky and having my punches go through in such a way that the thing actually goes down. I think the save characteristics are getting a little bit out of hand. The Emperor's Children Demon Prince has a somewhat similar profile to the C'tan, and it can also resurrect with a stratagem. So it can come back to life, and you can bring a model back to life with a certain number of its wounds remaining. And those wounds are not just wounds, they're wounds with invulnerable saves and Feel No Pains and -1 to damage wounds. So they're worth a little bit more than, you know, the 2 or 3 wounds that are on my Space Marines. The Apocalypse game was a ton of fun. I think the victory did eventually go to the Xenos, but we had some bad weather, and so we all kind of wrapped up a little bit early. But I would love to play some more Apocalypse. It was a wild time. Almost as wild as the fun time you'll have on EonsOfBattle.com. On EonsOfBattle.com, we have all kinds of hobby goodies, great type studio bits to spice up your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, basing cork, and we've got glue, ultra thin and ultra thick super glue. And we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made or the brand new one. New in March, we've created the Creeping Forest, a collection of mysterious living creatures that can populate a board perfect for any fantastical war game. Weave your models in between the scuttling crab trees, and you'd better watch your step or you'll get bit by the timber mimics. As you wander through a forest of monstrous mushrooms dripping with colorful toxins, you might come across the land kraken, a master of camouflage and a very dangerous encounter. This wondrous terrain collection was invented by us and is available physically and as STL from EonsOfBattle.com. 11th edition is right around the corner, and in the meantime, I have been playing a bunch of 40k. I've got one more game in my 40k league tonight, actually. If I can manage to win this, then I'll be 2 for 5, which I feel like is not bad for my usual win rate, which is pretty darn low. But my Black Templar have been doing a lot of killing, and it feels pretty good. Thanks for watching.